Good afternoon, everyone. Running a test here for tonight's Word on Wednesdays live series, just making sure we're connecting to the internet okay. Everything looks fine from here. But I also wanted to take some time today to talk to you. I haven't done that in a face-to-face sort of way online for a while, and that's probably good. You don't need to see my face all the time. It's detrimental to your health, possibly. I don't know. I just wanted to talk to you about a new sermon series that I'm trying to put together. I haven't got a real clear layout for that yet. I've put thought into it, and it's maybe I'm biting off more than I can chew, so that I'm concerned about. But at the same time, I think some kind of overview of what God has revealed in His Word about what is happening in the world and what He is doing, what our involvement in that is supposed to be, and that sort of thing. It's kind of a broad subject. I'm calling it Signs and Wonders, and I think that's the prophetic emphasis of the series that I want to engage in. Should have had this scripture passage ready to share with you, but I don't have it handy right now. But you may recall the passage where Jesus is talking to the scribes and Pharisees, and he says, you can look at the sky and you can see when it's red at night that it will be a fair day tomorrow, but if the sky is red in the morning, then look out for storms for the day, that kind of thing. And he says you're able to read the signs in of the weather and so forth, but you're not able to discern the signs of the times. And so that's kind of where the Signs and Wonders title comes from, just thinking about the idea of signs. Of course, he's talking about the time in which he lived and was ministering here on earth, and they were living, that they needed to recognize him as their Jewish Messiah. And they weren't doing that. You're looking around, you know what the day-to-day kind of thing is going to be, but you're not getting any bigger than that. You're not looking beyond that. You're not seeing what's actually happening right in front of your face. The Messiah, I am your Messiah, I am here. But you're not able to discern that. And that was, he knew that problem was going to exist. It's just imperative upon him to tell them that he knew that problem existed and that they were not able to tell who he was. But that same principle applies regardless of what stage we're in God's plan. And for the ages. We looked at some of this last year with the 10 C's. When I first started preaching, we went over and covered the 10 C's of the Bible, and is getting a sense of that God has a plan for things. He's unfolding things one stage at a time, and we looked at 10 different phases of that, just based upon, I like the number 10, and it's easy to find different stages and phases with those 10 C's. There was creation, right, when he created everything. Then there was corruption, when sin and rebellion entered into the world. There was a catastrophe that followed that with Noah's Ark. And then there was the confusion of languages following Babylon, or the Tower of Babel, rather, and following the flood, the great flood of Noah's day, the great catastrophe that took place, and then followed by the confusion, and then entered into a time of covenants with Abraham, with Moses, the covenant of the law, which was a conditional sort of thing. But the covenant with Abraham was unconditional on God's part, and also the covenant that he made with David for the kingdom. Unconditional, that your house will last forever. And there was no condition placed upon that would ever change. And of course, that leads to the Messiah, which brings us to the New Testament. Christ is the next C in the list, and there's 5 for the New Testament. There's Christ, there's the cross, there's the church, and then he will return for his crown to reign, And then there's the ultimate consummation of all things when all is said and done as his reign on earth moves on into the eternal state of all things. And so those are the 10 C's that we looked at just as a kind of an overview of that. But in the thing that motivates this series is kind of a response. It's kind of interesting, the 10 C's, not knowing that COVID was going to be a C that we were going to be dealing with last year and on into this year with this pandemic. The 10 C's sort of laid out, it kind of was preparatory to that in my mind, to know that God is at work, because things really drastically changed over the last year. A lot of it was another C word, a culmination of events that finally blossomed, so to speak, during this past year, at least as far as events that certain people in the secular world were trying to accomplish and have been trying to accomplish, I believe, for some time. And that's one thing that I'm looking at in this series. Because we look at our culture, we look at our society, we look at our nation around us today, and we wonder, what on earth is happening? What's going on? It's just been so bizarre, so strange, not just because of the pandemic, that's been part of it, but a lot of the responses to it and a lot of the actions and things that people are doing as though they were taking advantage of this pandemic in order to do those things, to rock some change into our world. And is there a purpose behind that? Is there something going on? I believe, as we've said numerous times in sermons and so forth, including during the 10 C's, there is a real spiritual battle that is going on. And you may not see the players in the battle in what we watch happening around us, but you can certainly see the impact and the effects of what they're doing. And this is part of what's going on, what's happening. And this battle is ages old. Ages old. It goes back to the rebellion of Lucifer, if you want to call him that, or Satan, and coming right on down through. And there's a lot of different aspects about that spiritual realm that we should look at and things we should consider. So the series is going to include some of that and looking into things like God's divine counsel. What does that mean? How does that play out in the affairs that God runs? He has a counsel system that he put into place. What happened with that? There's a rebellion there that needs to be looked into. What was the responsibility of that divine counsel? We'll take a look at some of those kinds of things because it leads into what happens here on earth. Because when we're talking about prophecy, after all, the things that are yet to come, and of course there are things that have happened that were yet to come at one point and were prophesied. Prophecy in the Bible, biblical prophecy given by God, is history written in advance. Right? It's not something that where a gypsy in a tent somewhere or a trailer pulls out a crystal ball and stares into it and tries to foresee events that are going to take place in that way and sort of say, this is what I see happening or what's going to take place. You're going to meet the man of your dreams or whatever. It's not that kind of thing. God's saying, here's what I'm going to do. All right, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to do, and here's how it's going to play out. And he gives some hints and some clues and some inferences and pictures and so forth of this is what it's going to look like. But it's not some kind of thing where God is looking into the future. God's already there because God is timeless. All right? And he's saying, here's what's happening tomorrow. Here's what's happening next year, the next century, whatever it is. This is history written in advance, okay? And there's a lot of things that have been happening that you may not be aware of. Here's a book by a guy by the name of Klaus Schwab. All right, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. I don't know Klaus Schwab's particular theology or his religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs, if he has any at all. I don't know. He's the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. And in this fourth industrial revolution, in his book, he outlines the key technologies driving this revolution. There have, according to him, have been 3 revolutions before, industrial revolutions at different times. Part of it is the technology that we experienced in the 80s and so forth, the boom of running in through that. But now it's going to manifest in much larger ways. It's coming to a place near you. And it involves robotics, it involves nanotechnology, it involves artificial intelligence, and it involves various things of that nature. And it's going to happen. It's going to hit us. And he's excited about it, okay? He thinks this is a great thing. This is going to deal with a lot of our problems. We just have to change some things. He holds to an idea called, let me see, it's on the back of his other book that I have here. He holds to an idea of stakeholder capitalism. And you have seen undoubtedly lots of emphasis on socialism in our country over the last year and a half, or even longer. Social justice warriors there. I just swapped over to tonight's slide there. Social justice warriors out there trying to inculcate and create the kind of social justice that they think is happening. And it all depends on how they define social and how they define justice, right? And so that's something that's been happening. And stakeholder capitalism, it's a managed kind of capitalism, okay? It's not free market, free enterprise capitalism, which is what we've tried to maintain in the United States and actually has been responsible for the different industrial revolutions that have taken place and so forth. He wants to move into a different direction with that and manage it a little bit better and guide and direct the world. Okay? After all, he is in the World Economic Forum. Sorry, I keep bebopping between that. I need to get my hands away from that computer. This is the book that he came out with just last year. The Industrial Revolution, the Fourth Industrial Revolution book, goes back a few years, about 5 or 6, something like that. I think 2016 it might have come out. This is 2020. COVID-19 and the Great Reset. COVID-19, the Great Reset. It sort of takes ideas found in this book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, and talks about how those things can be implemented through this pandemic. Okay? In other words, kind of saying, there's some advantages to having a complete economic shutdown of all the businesses and everything else, because it gives us a chance to reset the system, just like that button on the bowling alley, right? You can totally reset everything and start over. And we have an opportunity before us, folks. We need to take advantage of it. Remember, he's heading up the World Economic Forum. So there are things like that I need to get better informed about and understand more clearly, because I think we need to be aware of things that are happening around us. I think it behooves us to be that way. As Americans, we are not supposed to be spectators of what's going on. We are in the game. As Christians, we are in the game. And I believe it was that kind of attitude that led to the founding of our country in the first place. And so this is an American way to do things, to try to, I don't know that we can save the America that we have. I'm not sure about that. I don't think we can turn the clock back. I think in some ways America is reaping the judgment that we have been deserving for a long time. And when I say we, I mean the collective, all of us together. That the decisions that we have either made ourselves or have allowed to be made in our society and have not done much to stop. We do not have people who stand strong in powers of position. We've been talking about Daniel here, and I see the screen is frozen there for a little bit. We've been talking about Daniel here, and he takes a stand. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Dare to be a Daniel. We don't have leaders in this country taking a stand. In fact, we see some leadership in our churches falling apart, collapsing. Do you realize, and I'll say this tonight too, that the latest poll taken, I forget who did the poll, but I think it might have been, it's going to escape me. Never mind. I won't try to think of it. But the latest poll taken on church attendance and when religious attendance in general, whether it's a church, synagogue, or mosque or whatever, for the first time in American history, since these things have been polled, for the first time, less than 50% of Americans attend religious services regularly. Less than half. That is starting to follow the pattern that's been going on in Europe for the last several decades. It's not surprising in a way, but it also tells us where our priorities are and where they aren't. And that's why I say we are reaping what has been sown, which if people would read the Bible and would understand it, they would get that principle pretty quickly by reading what Scripture says. It's how God plans things. It's how He's done things. So with that in mind, that's some of just sort of a hint, because it's still kind of a rough idea in my mind of what this new sermon series will be about. The time is upon me because I plan to start it this Sunday, and there'll be more going on with that. I hope that you can attend the services. We are called to assemble together whenever we can, and I understand that people may not feel comfortable coming back to church yet, but I also think we need to ask questions about that ourselves, and I think it would behoove you to review your church attendance policy in your home and see where you're at on that and what's going on. I think it may be too comfortable sometimes. As much as I love using this technology to teach more people, I think sometimes we think, we're, going to be fine just doing it this way. And there's something about not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together in Hebrews 10:25. And we might want to think that through a little bit. And I know there's mitigating circumstances. Some of you are older. Your children don't want you to come to church and so forth. And they're, and I understand those kinds of things. I'm just saying each of us needs to evaluate that and think about things through about what we would do. Because there is a very real spiritual battle at play. We are part of it. It will culminate in the return of Christ. Are we ready, and are we doing all we can to help others be ready for that time when He comes? That's what we want to pursue. So I hope you can join us for that. Thank you so much for your kind attention. God bless. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tonight for the lesson number 8 on the Lion's Den, Daniel chapter 6. All right, bye-bye.